Good morning, Sandy.
Good morning, Amy.
How are you today?
You know what? I'm good. This our topic today has me thinking. So I've been thinking a lot this morning about a subject I hadn't thought about before. So yeah, hopefully when we're done, when I walk the dog, I have some new reflective thinking. You can teach old dogs new tricks. So yeah. How
Yeah,
about you? How are you?
same. This topic, which I appreciate you bringing it to me, or for this discussion, is a very thought-provoking. And so, what we're talking about today is being real or being nice. And it's a little bit of, is that right? Is it being real or being truthful? Being
Well,
real versus being, yes.
it's
And they
being
talk
real
about in the
versus being
article,
nice under the thought of truthfulness. And it
yes.
came
Okay.
from yoga study. The quick background was I was in Kingman doing yoga with my mother at the wellness center, and I had never been to yoga in Kingman before. And it's awesome that my mom started yoga at age 78, and she bought a book about the practice of yoga and the science behind the yoga. And where that came from is the yoga instructor actually reads out of this book at the very end. And so as we are laying there relaxing, and there's a great yoga name for it, but I'm not a yogi enough to know all these words. She read this passage, and it was, I hope I pronounce this right. Satya, Satya, is the practice. Do you think I'm pronouncing that correctly, Amy?
Good
Go with it. Satya, Satya. But it's about truthfulness in
effort.
yoga. And she read this passage about there's a difference between being nice versus real, and choosing real. And it gave examples, and I thought, I just was raised to think you're just always nice, and that there's a difference between nice and real leads to truthfulness. So that's the core of where it came from. So my mom sent me a copy of the book. I downloaded it on my Kindle, and I've been reading it, and I think I've reread this chapter a few times because it was a concept I thought part of yoga or part of being a good person was always being nice, but challenging the truthfulness outside of nice.
Right. And I, I agree. Like this whole, I've read this chapter. I think you sent it to me on Monday, and we're on Friday now. Wasn't, I think it was Monday.
That
And
was
uh, it, I've been thinking about it all week. And one of the things it opens up with truth isn't safe, but it is good. And that right there was, I was like, is that true? Like, is that really true that truth isn't safe, but it is good? And then they follow up with, all lies would make no sense unless the truth feels dangerous. And then that's where I made the connection. Okay, it's not safe. So truth is safe sometimes. Sometimes it's easy, the truth, but sometimes it's more dangerous. And
right.
that's where we start juggling on whether we're going to tell the truth or if we're going to be real or if we're going to not.
So I
We're
had
going to be nice.
to the nice word. I had to wrap my brain around that, and this was a good exercise because I was interplaying the word nice with kind. And kind is a big word right now, right? Be kind, just be kind. So how can I say don't be nice? Nice and kind are different. So we're not saying don't be kind, because kind is a great thing. Kind is the definition of kind is being generous, a considerate nature, friendly. Okay, yeah. Back to the sayings on the shirt, being kind is free. Everybody can be kind. Well, what's being nice? Being nice is being agreeable. It's being pleasant. It's being satisfactory. Agreeable. So being agreeable and satisfactory does not equate to being real all the time, right? It's
Right.
the lady in the story gave a story of her friend that said, I feel like I put myself into a box and I package myself in the size of the box and the bow based off of the person I'm talking to. That's being nice. That's fitting yourself into being agreeable to what they want from you. But that is not being real, because she's not being her real person. She's contorting herself to what's most agreeable to the people around her. And that's not truthful, right?
Right. Right. And that resonated with me at that part of the story when she said, if we brought everybody in my life into one room, like who they wouldn't know who I was, I wouldn't
Hey,
know who to be.
who to be?
Yeah.
That was her scariest thing, is what if everybody's together? How do I know who to be? And,
Yeah.
I'll give you a story that came to mind to me that I never connected the dots. You know how you kind of innately know it, but I'm like, this is such a story of being my real authentic person versus being agreeable and nice. I'm in Durango, everyone is new to me. And so it's not like they're longtime friends. Some I've just known for a short period, but they're friends because they were on my list to give a gift to for Christmas. And so what I did is I made my mom's traditional tea ring. But what I included in that, so that there was, let's just say, a dozen people that I made tea rings for. So again, they're not strangers. We're friends. We're going out with them. I'm considering them my new friends. And what I hesitated, because I had written a blog post, a short story. It was very short, about where this tea ring came from and why it was important to me. And why it was is the year that I went through my divorce, my mom and I made like, 30 rings and delivered them to people. And it had a very joyful story around it, but it was pretty vulnerable for me to share this story because, we're just this couple that it's not about, nobody here knows about my divorce. They don't know about my parents staying with me. And I thought, forget it. That's me. That's my story. And I'll tell you, there were a couple people that were like, oh my gosh, I didn't, know this side. I didn't know your whole story. And they're my very close friends, fast forward a year later. And there were a couple of people that were a little, I wouldn't say, I felt like they were a little taken aback. They never acknowledged the letter. That wasn't the box they wanted. They just wanted a fun couple. And it was being real versus being nice. And it isn't that what happened in the friendships were triggered by this little story. But if I look at the authentic relationships, I can go back to just the story as one little part of it. The ones who I've been able to be real by have become real friends. And the
Yes.
ones where I had to package myself to be that new Durango couple, to be, if I was outside of that package and they weren't comfortable with the real, it hasn't evolved to real friendships. They haven't revolved. They haven't gone anywhere.
Yeah.
And I thought back to this, and it's like, that was kind of the first light bulb to me, is which ones I could be real and vulnerable and which ones I could not.
Right. I think that's a great story. It reminds me of the story in the article about the woman who met her husband for the first time and had assumed he was a gay man.
Mhm.
And so she presented herself to somebody that she thought would have no interest in her, in a relationship with her. So she was being her authentic self. She was presenting as just a possible friend, and it turned into one of a great relationship and a marriage because and she credits her being her authentic self with this person instead of, and I remember this when we were young and had an interest in a guy, and how you would, at least I did, present myself
Right.
as someone different and fun, and like, and then once you
Trying to
get to
be
know
that person that you think they want. But
them.
Amy, what's interesting is I've never articulated it so clearly as it's coming out now, but that's really what happened to Garrett and I, because how Garrett and I met was, he was a speaker at a conference I was at in Colorado, in Denver. And we started communicating, and it never crossed my mind I could date this guy because he lived in Denver and I lived in Omaha, and same with him. So we were very real and authentic and friends, because we would counsel each other over divorces, dating, and there was no packaging, because in a million years, I never thought I'd be dating a guy in Denver.
Right.
But it is in friendships and anything, just to be your authentic self. And you know what the other side is, Amy? You have to accept if that's not something they want. And
Yes.
I've learned that about being in Durango, and this will be, I give you advice in moving to Kansas City, is some friendships, there's no fighting, they just kind of fizzle out. And a couple of them, again, nothing bad, just maybe at first we did quite a few things together and then we just kind of stopped. And I think back, it's like, whatever happened? They never asked us to dinner last time we went to dinner. And I have to give myself the grace to say, that's okay. That's okay, because I didn't do anything wrong. I think we were real, and not all relationships work out. You have to be able to accept when things don't work out, when you are truthful in who you are,
Yes.
and not take it personally.
Right, 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 right. And also this concept of being nice and being agreeable, and how this person talked about, or the writer talked about, how it builds up inside of you, and then when it comes out, it's not pretty. Like there's, and I think of this because I have a relationship where we've just identified that they've been telling me things I want to hear for a long time, and instead of standing up
Interesting.
for
Okay.
themselves. And so, it's kind of a repair of, you have to be truthful with me. You have to tell me what you really think. Don't just agree with me. And what I've noticed in this relationship is they're very agreeable and have been for the last few years. And then there's a point where it just like, there's something that comes out of them that feels like, there's something wrong here. Something's going on. And and truthfully, I didn't even realize that they were just being agreeable and going along with stuff. And
Right.
so to me, I was completely oblivious. And then this eruption happens, and then it's like, okay, what's going on? And then it's a little bit of a reset. And so now I am now in the position of advocating for them and saying, tell me what you really think, because I want to make sure we're on the same page here. And or we're not on the same page, but I at least know what you're thinking and where you're coming from. Um so that's also a piece of this, is helping others be real and giving them a safe space so that they can speak their mind and just not be agreeable and go along with stuff.
I love that reminder, because we have to reciprocate and know it's not always easy, and be the path of least resistance is just to be nice. And
Yeah.
when you're in your relationships, to allow people to be vulnerable and ask questions like, is that how you really feel? That's fine. Giving them grace, right?
Right.
And acceptance, and knowing how they feel about things. Because it is interesting. I wonder how many people that I deal with, that they're just being nice and maybe they're not being truthful and real, and I don't even notice it.
Yeah. Right. And I'm just going to tell you, I've been oblivious until just recently. And then it's like, oh, wow. So it's been a real shift in our friendship. Um, One of the things that I thought of was, speaking up. So this being real, I'm glad you clarified the being kind versus being nice, because that being agreeable is, sometimes it's okay. I was thinking of the book, Don't Sweat the Small Stuff.
Right.
Like, you don't want to be disagreeable or standing up for yourself if it's really not a big deal. So, say someone cuts in line in front of at the grocery store,
Right.
and okay, if I am being real, my real authentic self, then I would probably say, you just cut in line, and maybe that's the right thing to say. Or I can just say, all right, it's not really a big deal. I'm just going to let him go because anyway,
Right.
there's opportunity. I can see both sides of it because standing up for yourself and saying, you just cut in line. I'm going to be kind about it.
Right.
And maybe that could make them aware that, hey, there's people behind you and we've all been waiting. Or it could be like, I'm in no hurry. They only have three things.
But here's an example I'm thinking of, just because Garrett and I just had this conversation about being agreeable, and I'm tying that into your don't sweat the small stuff. Is Garrett made a comment to me and he was teasing me. He said, "You always get your way." And I said, "I want to clarify that because I rarely have an opinion about things unless they're important to me." And I think I brought this up before in a previous conversation, but I think that matters because that doesn't mean I'm agreeable. That means that the small stuff that I really don't have an opinion on, I'm being real because it isn't important to me. So I'm not voicing my opinion. Right. And so the small stuff, you don't beat yourself up because you're thinking, wow, I'm just being agreeable. I'm not saying, you don't have to force an opinion on something, and it's okay for what's small to you to walk away. Right.
That's very well put. Thank you. Because that's exactly what I was thinking. And it's finding that balance of being real when you feel like you need to be real. Like if you're thinking about it and internalizing it, then
And then what about Amy? We're talking about things that, when we talk about relationships and friendships and spouses or significant others, how about work? Because those are people that's work is the harder one because it's easier to be agreeable and when to speak up and when not to speak up. And work could be professional associations, work that you're doing, but people that you have a relationship with, but they're not your tight, close friends and family. And the example I'll give that I thought of when I read this book was I didn't realize how much we had Midwestern nice in Omaha until I started working with a man from Ireland and a group of people from Ireland. And they're like, oh my gosh, everybody does business here as Midwestern nice. And what they meant by that is everybody's just so agreeable. Well, he would use to his benefit basically being a bully. He would disrupt the whole room because people would be like, their jaws would drop because we were also Midwestern nice. But that gets back to kind versus nice. That isn't so much being real, that's using manipulation, and we've dealt with that, right? Not being nice means you're not a good person to work with. So how do we dissect real in professional relationships? And is it different?
uh,
Stick with Midwestern nice and not, is it different in professional relationships?
you know what? Professionally, well, I don't think so, Sandy. Like, really, I think the people that I respect the most are typically the people that are sharing their thoughts, sharing their opinions, and helping me change my perspective about things and seeing things that I didn't see. So personally, I like different perspectives and to hear that. I get uncomfortable when I have because I work with the board. I'm a president of a board. And when we are in a meeting and somebody's presenting something and everybody agrees and there's no discussion, it
Right.
makes me really uncomfortable because I'm like, I don't feel like we're giving this the thought that it needs to be given. And we will go through Robert's Rules of Order to, arguments for, arguments against. We do the whole thing, clarifying questions, and there may not be any discussion. And so I'm either like, okay, we're all like, this is not a big deal, just go, or we're not giving it enough thought to have
Great
that
point.
discussion and we're not so I get uncomfortable more with that, with the agreeability of a whole group, because it's very rare that everybody would be on the exact same page.
Right,
Well, maybe, depends on how big the group is.
right.
If it's two people, you could be on the same page. But if there's more, there should be a little bit of questioning.
Being agreeable actually is not a good thing in business because that's not how you're transformative. That's not how you're innovative. It's not agreeable companies, not for profits, boards that are able to do their mission just because they're agreeable, right? Have you
Yeah.
ever seen a successful leader that said, wow, they're the most agreeable person I've ever met in my life? Give
Right.
him Pulitzer, you know?
No, but there is a part of you can be agreeable. There's finding that balance. You
Right,
can be kind and be disagreeable. I think that's the balance of, being respectful, being kind, but still speaking up for what your opinion is so that other people have, I think other people will respect you more if you
right.
speak.
Right. And just do it in a professional way. Back to we're talking about professional settings. It's not putting emotion into it. And that's where I would struggle in the past is I would tell you that I probably felt like being agreeable is the way to be. And working my way up through the corporate ladder, being a female and typically being in the younger cohort too, the expectation is to be agreeable. Back to our smile more, talk less. What was our podcast in the first season?
Yes. Talk less, smile more.
Thank you.
Yes.
But that's kind of the expectation. And what happens to me, my example would be back in my professional life is I would continue to be agreeable, but then I would, your point on, it's important when you're thinking about it and you're not expressing your real, but if you don't express it, sometimes it builds up and then it becomes emotional, right? And maybe 3 meetings in, I'm finally going to speak up and there's a crack in my voice. There's an emotion because I allowed it to build up rather than respectfully bringing up a different view earlier on. And I'll tell you, again, part of that is being the young female, but part of it is on me because I made the choice not to speak up, right?
Right.
That was
Yeah.
my choice. What to say, when to say, how to say it is 100% on me.
Well, that's part of your choice, but there has to be a culture of acceptance and safety too,
Mhm.
and respecting of different opinions, because if there's not that culture, then nobody's going to feel safe speaking
Right,
up. They're going to be doing the same things, which will create that hostile explosion of emotions and drama if everybody's holding things in, and then it gets bigger. It happens all the time to me where I think about something I should have said, and then it gets bigger and bigger in my head. And I'm like, I gotta say this and get this out and get this taken care of. Otherwise, it's gonna get even bigger and bigger. Um, but once you say it, it's like it's done. It's
right,
over. The drama is gone.
right,
And
right,
and hopefully, unless you say it not nicely,
right.
then the drama is tripled.
And being agreeable is the path of least resistance.
Yes, it's easy.
It's easy. And so many times, the bigger the group and the more the agreeable the group, and think about your board as an example. I've sat on many boards and you brought something up that made me think about which ones were the most effective. And when I say the most effective, it isn't about us, it's about the mission.
Yes.
Were the ones that were the least agreeable and always respectful, but constantly going back to the mission, rethinking things, saying, hey, have we thought about this? And that's why you have board members. That's why you have different partners around the table, is to bring different perspective. Because otherwise, just put somebody in charge to make all the decisions if
Yes.
everyone's going to agree.
I had, when I was first elected into the position I'm in, I had a mentor tell me that it was not my job to make all the decisions. It was my job to lead the board to make decisions. And I will tell you, I took that to heart because to me, and it's not letting one or two people on the board make decisions, it
Right,
was leading the whole board, and it's not my decision. It's almost like I have less power as president because I'm choosing not to make all the decisions. I'm just leading them to make the decision, which is a huge weight lifted off of me because there's some people who step in this position as like, oh, I'm making all these decisions. This is now my association. This is now my company. I'm it. I get to, and the nice thing is when the board makes great decisions, I do get some of the glory
right.
because they're like, oh, Amy, what a great
Good
decision.
job.
And I always give it back to the board. But CEOs of companies, you think about it, they get a lot of the accolades of the success of the company. But in reality, if they have a good culture, it's probably the board and
Right,
their upper management and everybody that's feeding into that to make a company successful. One person can't do everything.
right, right,
Think of just right now, and I know we're running lower on time. Liz Truss just resigned.
right.
And I think a lot about that. Who was she surrounding herself with? And why does she think that she was the one that created all of this turmoil and is responsible for all this turmoil? And I can see where she would feel the responsibility, but what was she the one creating everything that caused her to resign? And I don't know a lot about what's going on in the UK,
Mhm.
but it's just interesting because it's like she's very short term.
Right. In fact, I saved my news feeds this morning. There are three that I get, but two that usually hit on, the big world news. And they always have stories that are more in depth, and I am going to read more in depth on that to understand it. Um, the economic side, we happen to be vacationing in Moab with a guy who does a lot in finance, and he was explaining what was going on with the markets over there because it impacted his work, and he ended up on his computer a lot. So I kind of heard the economic side, which was interesting.
Yeah.
And I'm like, ooh, if that was happening over here, I get it. But I want you back to your point, the triggers, the people. I know she fired her head of treasury, but again, it's a position that's surrounded by a lot of different people. And I suppose too, I don't know a lot either, Amy, on that. But just like being the head of a board or a CEO of a company, you're directing the people to help make the good choices, but ultimately there's one person responsible, right? And just
Right.
like taking the good, it's also the bad, and knowing that there were others involved.
Right. Yes. Agree. All right. So let's talk a little bit. We're going to start wrapping up again with our
Okay.
questions. Okay. So, I'm going to start with the ideal. What's the ideal in this situation, in this discussion?
Do you want to go first? Do you want me to go first?
Well, I think the ideal is pretty straightforward. Just be real, like be yourself, be authentic, be kind.
Truthfulness lies in being real. Truthfulness does not lie in being nice. And I think it's good. The ideal too is a quick way to remind yourself when you're finding yourself being agreeable, but having that little bit of a pang of, I don't feel real right now, is just remember that if your mom told you to be nice, being agreeable does not equate to being real.
Yes.
Get
And
past real. Nice is different than kind.
yes, let's change the word to be kind, not be nice.
Mhm. I like
Let's be kind. And we don't have to be agreeable, but we can still be kind.
be kind and truthful, not kind and nice.
Now, I'm just going to balance this, but we don't want to always be disagreeable
Right. Right.
because it's no fun. It's no fun to be around somebody who's
It's
always
back
disagreeing.
to don't sweat the small stuff, right?
Exactly.
You got
Don't,
that thing. If
isn't
you
that
feel
isn't that the don't be a Karen? Like, I hate to
Karen. Oh, aren't you glad our mothers didn't name us Karen?
I know. I know. I had a best friend in high school named Karen and she was lovely. Okay. So what's the real in this? Eh, I'll let you go first this time.
I think the real is it's so much easier to be nice than to be truthful. It's just so much easier.
Yeah.
And but it doesn't feel as good. It's not authentic. If you want the real good authentic relationships, whether it be in work or otherwise, don't just be nice. Work to be real, and you're going to benefit from having the true, authentic, real relationships. You're going to feel better about yourself, and you're not going to be the package that you have to think about who you are for others. You get to be your wonderful self, and you can create a better world, Amy. How about that?
I love it. Well, what you just said really resonate. Being real with the people who matter.
Right.
I think that is the most important piece of this because not that some people don't matter, but the people that matter are the ones that you are wanting to build relationships with, and that's where you need to be the authentic real person. And that the real of this is that the truth feels dangerous sometimes, and we have to acknowledge it, and we have to and that's the hard part. And sometimes the truth is so dangerous that we aren't going to share it, and we just have to give ourselves grace and just keep trying to be more authentic to everyone we're around. And but know that we're not perfect. Nobody's perfect. Nobody's revealing their complete authentic self to everybody they meet. And it's okay. We're going to be okay. That's the real.
And the real is not everybody should matter to you. That
Yeah.
you can still be kind, but it does help sift things out too, right? To find the right mentor, to bask in the true friendships, to have value with your significant other. So they matter the most, right? And so every person matters, but who matters the most to you? And being real and being truthful will easily bring the good ones to the top and
Yes.
make the best relationships.
Yes. All right. So as I'm venturing to a new city to meet lots of new people, hopefully, I'm going to remember this conversation because what you said really resonated as far as revealing our real self and our true self means we're going to have better relationships, better friendships. So thank you.
Love it. Can't wait to hear back, Amy. You can
All right.
report back as you go.
Here we go. All right. Thanks, Sandy. Have a good week, and we'll
You
talk next
too.
week.
All
All
right.
right.
Bye.
Bye.